welcoming Janna Raye from Stratagems Smart Situations.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here today. I'm here to present a new organizational model that I've been researching and developing for several years that replaces the top-down hierarchy. I call it the Fractal organization, and it's emerging as a result of our desire for more cooperative workplace environments. And what I'll present today is information about why top-down environments actually reduce the flow of information in organizations and prevent adaptation to changing conditions. I was inspired by studying living systems in nature. You know, in nature, living systems cooperate and they share an environment, and everybody survives. It's a symbiotic flow of information and energy throughout the system that keeps all of the organisms, from the little microbes in the soil to the birds or the mammals alive. So it's an amazing process. And why is nature so successful at cooperating? I looked at this idea of cooperation and competition, and complexity theory mathematics actually shows that species in nature cooperate internally in order to compete externally for resources. This lion probably took, several days, a week, scouting out this herd of African buffalo. He wasn't looking for the biggest male, bull in the herd to take down. He doesn't have a mantelpiece to put the horns on, right? Now he's looking for grandma. Someone's moving really slow or maybe kind of itchy, They're the ones who are going to be the easiest to take down. It's a lot of work to kill a big animal. So now the lion in his pride can eat, and the African buffalo herd is free to roam because they don't have grandma holding him back anymore. This is the elimination of the weakest elements. But in human organizations, we've somehow taken this survival of the fittest to the extreme. Survival of the fittest was actually a British concept that the aristocracy created in the 1700s to justify their less than ethical dealings with the burgeoning peasant population. And in the 1800s, Charles Darwin colluded with them to include survival of the fittest as part of evolutionary theory. But his competitor, Alfred Wallace, actually proved or knew back then what today's modern evolutionary biologists agree, that evolution is a mechanism of the elimination of the weakest in a species, not the survival of the fittest. So in a typical union versus management battle, you have what is apparently a struggle for resources. There's a perception that there's a scarcity of resources, and our resources aren't being delegated to us, and so it creates all these internal battles. What a waste of time and energy that is. The other type of internal competition in top-down hierarchies is the climb to the top of the ladder. There's only so much room at the top. In situations where the personal agenda supersedes the collective goal, you actually have a lack of trust that evolves in the environment, and it creates a lot of stress for people. If you can't trust people, then you get stressed out. And in fact, there have been several scientific studies of where they have pitted mice against each other and mimicked human depression in the mice. So, when we're not cooperating, we're actually depressing each other. In nature, species cooperate internally, again, in order to work together more as a team. This flock of geese is flying in a formation that actually makes it easier for them all to get to the same place with a lot less energy. And they rotate the flock leader because that's the most demanding position. Oh, the geese and the clouds in the background are both fractal patterns. And honeybees are an example of insect species that cooperate internally in order to compete externally for resources. So what we want to look at is whether or not these are systemic behaviors or personality issues, because in most top-down hierarchies, all of these problems that are created are dealt with as personality issues and not as something that emerges out of the type of system. A really good example is the Stanford prison experiment. How many people have heard of the Stanford prison experiment of 1971? Well, back in 1971, 2 weeks before term, they recruited male college students for a paid volunteer. They 2 weeks before term come in, play prisoner or guard, and it was really randomly chosen. And within 3 days after the experiment started, half the prisoners quit. within 6 days, they just had to end the experiment. It just devolved into entropy chaos. The guards became sadistic and abusive. The prisoners turned into a cowering, anxiety-ridden, wimps or whatever. And the researcher concluded that it was the situation, not the personality of the guards, that caused these behaviors to emerge. Entropy chaos in top-down organizations has several types of qualities that emerge in it. Internal competition, information silos, negative harmonics, that's all the gossip and the negative talk, and then of course the unwanted turnover. That's the turnover when people who have a lot of information about what's going on leave because they're not really getting what they want, or they're just tired of the environment. All living beings are complex adaptive systems, which means that they are able to adapt to changes in their environments and evolve successfully. All living systems in nature display interdependency. They are interdependent. In other words, they know they have to rely upon each other. Just like those geese we saw earlier, if a goose drops out of formation, 2 geese drop out to go with it. It might be sick or something, so they follow the goose and they stay with it until it either gets well or dies. And then they will either, if they can find their flock, it may be too late, they might have to join a new flock. But they do not leave that goose until it either gets well or dies. All systems in nature have scalable structures, means at every level there's a different level of organization. Like even the human body is a scalable structure. So your head, trunk, and limbs, there's like scale 1, and then your DNA is all the way down to scale 4. And at every scale, there's a pattern, and this is the fractal beauty of nature. And because of this scalability and the different levels of organization, emergent behaviors arise out of that. In other words, the complexity allows a new behavior or structure to emerge. Now, you might say that even walking would be an emergent behavior of having legs. So self-organization is the key to complex adaptive systems evolving and changing as things are changing around them. They have the ability to adapt and go with the flow. Here's some examples of some beautiful fractal patterns in nature that show their pattern integrity. Ferns have been around for millions of years and have held their pattern integrity and have evolved over 20,000 species of ferns in that time. And that again is through the evolutionary process, but they still have fernness to them. This is an amazing Romanesco broccoli flower. Beautiful fractal pattern. And a spiral aloe plant. I want one of those for my garden. Benoit Mandelbrot, who is the father of fractal geometry, described spiral galaxies as macrofractal patterns because they're pattern holds. The stars don't just fly apart. And so the fractal organization has a similar structure, and everyone's a star. Companies like Pixar are organized this way. They have the core leaders of the organization in the center, and then all of the films are organized as arms around the core leaders. And so each director is sitting at the center with the core leaders. He's the director or she's the director of the arm, and all those directors and the core leaders make up the brain trust. And then within all of the arms, each of the teams that are creating different aspects of the film's production have leaders sitting at round tables with their teams. And so the information that the team is creating within their process is actually then being funneled from the team itself into the center of the organization through the leader as a conduit of that information. So as the team is evolving their project, and they have different needs for resources or whatever, those needs get communicated into the center of the organization where resources can be allocated. And then information and resources flow back out. It's a nice even flow.